I never thought a phone call could shatter 11 years of silence until the day my ex-wife's number flashed on my screen, and those words hit me like a freight truck. Your daughter needs your bone marrow or she's going to die. 11 years of absence. 11 years of running from responsibility. 11 years of being the father who walked away. And now I'm the only person on this planet who can save her life. This is the story of how I abandoned my family, how I justified every selfish decision I made, and how one medical emergency forced me to face the man I had become. Stay with me, because what happened in that hospital room changed everything I thought I knew about redemption, fatherhood, and second chances. My name is Marcus, and I need to be honest with you from the start. I wasn't some victim of circumstances who accidentally became a bad father. I made a choice. I looked at my 3-month-old daughter Emily, looked at my exhausted wife Sarah, and I made the deliberate decision to walk out that door. I was 24 years old, working a dead-end job at a warehouse, coming home to a tiny apartment that smelled like diapers and sour milk, and I convinced myself I deserved better. I convinced myself that fatherhood was a trap, that marriage had stolen my youth, that I needed to find myself before I could be there for anyone else. Looking back now, I can see those justifications for exactly what they were. Just cowardice dressed up in self-help language that made abandonment sound like personal growth. The day I left, Sarah was dealing with Emily's colic. Our daughter had been screaming for 3 hours straight, and I remember standing in that cramped living room, watching my wife rock our baby back and forth with tears streaming down her face. She looked at me with these desperate eyes and asked me to just hold Emily for 10 minutes so she could take a shower. 10 minutes. That's all she needed. And I looked at both of them, grabbed my jacket, and told her I was going out for cigarettes. I didn't smoke. I never came back. I drove to my buddy's place across town, crashed on his couch, and started building a new life that didn't include the family I had created. For the first few months, Sarah tried to reach me. She called, she texted, she even showed up at my work once with Emily in a car seat, begging me to just meet my daughter, to be part of her life in whatever capacity I could manage. I avoided her. I blocked her number. I told my supervisor to say I wasn't there whenever she came by. Eventually, she stopped trying. The divorce papers came through the mail. I signed them without reading them, sent them back, and that was it. Clean break. Or so I thought. What I didn't understand then was that you can't get a clean break from your own child. You can run, you can hide, you can build walls and burn bridges, but somewhere out there is a little girl with half your DNA who exists, whether you acknowledge her or not. I spent the next 11 years building what I thought was a good life. I worked my way up to a management position at a logistics company, bought a decent car, rented a nice apartment in a better part of town, dated women who didn't know about my past, and convinced myself that I had made the right choice. I told myself that Emily was better off without me, that Sarah had probably found someone else who could be a real father to our daughter, that my absence was actually a gift because I would have just messed everything up anyway. I became really good at not thinking about them. I perfected the art of changing the subject whenever anyone asked if I had kids. I even convinced myself that the guilt I felt on Emily's birthday every year was just nostalgia, not regret. Then came the phone call that destroyed every lie I had been telling myself. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I was sitting in my office going through inventory reports when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sarah's voice came through the line, and I immediately felt my stomach drop. She hadn't called me in over a decade. Her voice was shaking when she said my name, and I knew before she even explained that something was terribly wrong. She told me that Emily had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia 3 months ago, that she had been going through chemotherapy, that the cancer wasn't responding to treatment, and that the doctors said her only chance for survival was a bone marrow transplant from a genetic match. Sarah explained that she had been tested, her parents had been tested, her sister had been tested, and none of them were compatible. They had searched the bone marrow registry and couldn't find a match. The doctors told her that the best chance for finding a compatible donor was a biological parent or sibling. Emily didn't have any siblings. That left me. Sarah's voice broke when she asked me if I would be willing to get tested, and I remember sitting there in my leather office chair surrounded by my professional achievements, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. This woman I had abandoned, asking me to save the daughter I had never known, and all I could think about was how much I didn't deserve this opportunity to matter. I told Sarah I would get tested. What else could I say? I'm sorry, but I walked out on you 11 years ago, so I'm going to let our daughter die. Even I wasn't that much of a monster. We arranged for me to go to the hospital the next day for blood work. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Emily, this 11-year-old girl I had never met who was fighting for her life. I tried to imagine what she looked like, whether she had my eyes or Sarah's smile, whether she was shy or outgoing, what her favorite subject in school was, what she wanted to be when she grew up. All these details that a father should know, and I didn't know any of them because I had chosen not to. The testing process was simple. They drew some blood, told me results would take about a week, and sent me home. That week was the longest of my life. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that somewhere in a hospital, a little girl who shared my DNA was sick and scared and didn't even know I existed. Sarah had told me that she had never spoken badly about me to Emily. She had simply told our daughter that her father had left when she was a baby, and that sometimes people aren't ready to be parents. She had protected me even when I didn't deserve protection. She had given Emily a version of the story that didn't paint me as the villain I actually was. When the hospital called with the results, I was in a meeting. I stepped out into the hallway, and the genetic counselor told me that I was a perfect match. 10 out of 10 markers. The best possible scenario for Emily's chances of survival. She explained what the donation process would involve, the risks to me, which were minimal, and the timeline they were hoping for, which was as soon as possible. Emily's condition was deteriorating. They needed to move fast. I agreed to everything without hesitation. For the first time in 11 years, I was going to do something for my daughter. The hospital scheduled the bone marrow donation for 2 weeks later. That gave them time to prepare Emily's body for the transplant, and gave me time to prepare myself mentally for what was coming. Sarah asked if I wanted to meet Emily before the procedure. My first instinct was to say no. What would I even say to her? Hi, I'm the father who abandoned you, but I'm here now because you need my bone marrow. How do you explain 11 years of absence to a sick child? But Sarah insisted. She said Emily deserved to know who I was, that she had been asking questions about me ever since she found out I was her donor, and that it would mean everything to her to meet me before the transplant. We arranged to meet at the hospital on a Saturday afternoon. I must have changed my outfit 5 times that morning. What do you wear to meet the daughter you abandoned? I settled on jeans and a button-down shirt, trying to look approachable but not too casual. I drove to the hospital with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I parked in the visitor lot and sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to calm down. Finally, I forced myself to walk inside. Sarah met me in the lobby. She looked older, obviously, but still beautiful, tired, worn down by stress and fear. She gave me a small, sad smile and led me to the pediatric oncology ward. Emily's room was at the end of the hallway. Sarah stopped outside the door and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She told me that Emily was nervous but excited to meet me. She said our daughter was smart and kind and brave, and that she hoped I would see what an amazing person she had become despite my absence. Then she opened the door. Emily was sitting up in her hospital bed, wearing a pink headscarf because the chemotherapy had taken her hair. She had my eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. These big hazel eyes that looked exactly like mine. She was thin and pale, but she smiled when she saw me. This genuine, hopeful smile that absolutely destroyed me. I walked over to her bed, and I didn't know what to do with my hands. Do I hug her? Do I shake her hand? What's the protocol for meeting your daughter for the first time when she's 11 years old and dying? Emily made the decision for me. She looked up at me and said, in this small, clear voice, that she was glad I came. She said thank you for being willing to help her. Thank you. This child was thanking me for doing the bare minimum, for showing up after 11 years when her life depended on it. I sat down in the chair next to her bed, and I tried to find words. I told her I was sorry. I told her I had made terrible mistakes and that I had missed out on knowing her, and that I wished I could go back and change everything, but I couldn't. Emily listened to me stumble through my apology, and then she said something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. She said that her mom had told her that people make mistakes, and that what matters is whether they try to do better. She said she didn't know me and I didn't know her, but maybe after all this was over we could get to know each other. Maybe we could start over. This 11-year-old child who was fighting cancer was offering me grace I didn't deserve. She was giving me permission to be her father, even though I had done nothing to earn that title. I broke down right there in her hospital room. I put my head in my hands, and I cried in front of my daughter and my ex-wife, and I didn't care who saw me. Sarah eventually stepped out to give us some privacy. Emily and I talked for about an hour. She told me about school, about how she loved reading and wanted to be a teacher someday, about her best friend Madison who visited her in the hospital every week, about how scary it was when she first got sick, but how the doctors and nurses had been really nice to her. She asked me questions too. What kind of work did I do? Did I have any pets? What was my favorite movie? Simple questions that any daughter might ask her father. Except these were the first questions my daughter had ever asked me. I answered as honestly as I could, and with every question, I felt the weight of everything I had missed. Tell me in the comments, could you forgive someone who walked out on you if they came back 11 years later? The day of the transplant came faster than I expected. The procedure itself wasn't complicated for me. They put me under general anesthesia, extracted bone marrow from my hip, and I woke up a few hours later sore but fine. The real challenge was for Emily. She had to undergo intense conditioning treatment before the transplant to destroy her existing bone marrow and immune system, making room for mine. It was brutal. Sarah texted me updates throughout the process, and every message made me feel more helpless. Emily was vomiting. Emily had a fever. Emily was in pain. And all I could do was lie in my recovery room and hope that what I had given her would be enough. They transferred my bone marrow to Emily that same day. I wanted to be there with her, but the doctors said it was better if I rested and let my body recover. Sarah sent me a photo of Emily getting the transfusion. She was lying in her hospital bed with IV lines running into her arm, and she was giving a thumbs up to the camera. Even in the middle of this terrifying medical procedure, my daughter was trying to be brave. I saved that photo on my phone, and I must have looked at it 100 times that night. This was my child. This brave, kind, incredible person was my child, and I had almost missed the chance to know her. The weeks after the transplant were tense. Emily had to stay in the hospital in isolation because her immune system was completely compromised. Any infection could kill her. Sarah practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in a chair next to Emily's bed, barely eating, running on coffee and fear. I visited every day after work. At first, I felt like an intruder, like I didn't have the right to be there after all this time. But Sarah never made me feel unwelcome. She understood that I was trying, that I wanted to be there for Emily, even if I had no idea how to do it properly. Slowly, she started trusting me with small things. She would go to the cafeteria for lunch and leave me alone with Emily. She would go home to shower and change clothes, knowing I would stay with our daughter. Emily and I developed our own routine during those hospital visits. I would bring her books from the library because she was bored out of her mind stuck in that room. We would read together, or I would read to her when she was too tired to focus on the words herself. We watched movies on her laptop, mostly animated films that made her laugh. We played card games and board games. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about the kids at school she didn't like, about the crush she had on a boy named Tyler in her math class, about how much she missed her cat, Mr. Whiskers, who her grandma was taking care of while she was in the hospital. I told her stories about my childhood, about my parents who had passed away before she was born, about the stupid things I did as a teenager that made her giggle. About 3 weeks after the transplant, the doctors did a bone marrow biopsy to see if my cells were engrafting in Emily's body. Sarah and I waited together in the hallway outside Emily's room while they did the procedure. It was the first time we had really talked alone since all of this started. She asked me what my plans were after Emily recovered. Did I want to be part of her life permanently, or was this just a temporary thing because of the medical emergency? I told her the truth. I said, I didn't know how to be a father, that I had proven that pretty clearly already, but that I wanted to learn. I wanted to be there for Emily if she would let me. I wanted to make up for lost time, even though I knew I could never really make up for 11 years. Sarah looked at me for a long time before she responded. She said that Emily deserved consistency, that if I was going to be in her life, I needed to commit to it fully, not just show up when it was convenient or when I felt guilty. She said Emily had been through enough pain and disappointment, and she wouldn't let me add to it. I promised her that I understood. I promised that I would do whatever it took to be the father Emily needed, even if that meant going to therapy, even if that meant facing all the reasons I had run away in the first place. Sarah nodded slowly and told me she would hold me to that promise. Then the doctor came out with the biopsy results. The transplant was working. My bone marrow cells were successfully engrafting in Emily's body. Her counts were starting to improve. It was the best possible news, but the doctor cautioned us that Emily still had a long road ahead. She would need to stay in the hospital for at least another month, and after that she would need regular monitoring for years to watch for complications or relapse. But for the first time since this nightmare started, there was real hope. Sarah started crying right there in the hallway, and I hugged her without thinking about it. We stood there holding each other like we used to 11 years ago, both of us crying with relief and fear and gratitude that our daughter might actually survive this. Emily came home from the hospital 6 weeks after the transplant. Sarah had decorated the house with welcome home banners and balloons. Emily's grandmother and aunt were there, along with her best friend Madison. I was invited too, which felt significant. So I was being included in this family moment, this celebration of Emily's survival. I brought Emily a gift, a leather-bound journal and a nice pen, because I knew she loved writing. She hugged me when she opened it, this real, tight hug that made my chest ache. She whispered thank you in my ear, and I whispered back that she didn't need to thank me, that I should be thanking her for giving me another chance. The months that followed were an adjustment for everyone. I started seeing Emily regularly, picking her up from school once a week and taking her out for dinner or to the bookstore, or just driving around talking. Sarah set boundaries, which I respected completely. I wasn't allowed to make promises I couldn't keep. I wasn't allowed to disappoint Emily by cancelling plans. I wasn't allowed to act like the last 11 years didn't happen. I had to earn my place in Emily's life one day at a time. It was hard. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility, when I wanted to run away again because being a father was uncomfortable and complicated and forced me to confront all my failures. But I didn't run. I stayed. I showed up for Emily's school play, even though I had to leave work early and it messed up a big project I was managing. I helped her study for her history test, even though I barely remembered anything about the Civil War. I sat with her while she cried about a fight she had with Madison, having no idea what to say but knowing that being there was what mattered. I learned that fatherhood isn't about having all the answers or being perfect. It's about showing up consistently, about being present even when it's hard, about choosing your child over your comfort every single time. Sarah started dating someone about 8 months after Emily's transplant. His name was David, and he was a teacher at Emily's school. I'm not going to lie and say I handled it perfectly. I felt jealous, I felt angry. This guy got to be part of Emily's daily life in ways I didn't because of choices I had made years ago. He got to have dinner with them, help Emily with homework, be there for the mundane, everyday moments that I had missed. But Emily liked him, and Sarah deserved happiness after everything she had been through. So I kept my feelings to myself, and I focused on building my own relationship with Emily that wasn't dependent on my relationship with Sarah. Emily's 1-year post-transplant checkup showed that she was in complete remission. No signs of cancer. Her blood counts were normal. Her immune system was functioning properly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that she had beaten this thing. We had a small celebration at Sarah's house. David was there, along with Emily's grandparents and aunt and Madison. I felt out of place at first, like I was crashing a party I wasn't really invited to, but Emily insisted I sit next to her at the table. She held my hand during the prayer Sarah's mother said before dinner, and in that moment I understood something fundamental. I wasn't Emily's only parent, and I never would be. Sarah had been there for every milestone I had missed. David was becoming an important person in Emily's life. Emily's grandmother had stepped up in ways I never did, but there was still room for me. Emily's heart was big enough to include all of us. I started going to therapy like I had promised Sarah I would, I needed to understand why I had run, why I had convinced myself that abandoning my family was acceptable. My therapist helped me see that I had been terrified of failure, terrified of becoming like my own father, who had been emotionally distant and critical. I had thought that leaving was better than staying and inevitably disappointing everyone. But what I had actually done was guarantee the disappointment by never giving myself a chance to try. I had robbed Emily of a father and robbed myself of the opportunity to know my daughter because I was afraid. Understanding this didn't erase what I had done, but it helped me make sure I wouldn't do it again. Emily turned 12, then 13. I was there for both birthdays. I watched her blow out candles and open presents and laugh with her friends. I saw her grow from a sick, fragile child into a healthy, vibrant teenager. She developed interests and opinions and dreams. She decided she wanted to be a marine biologist instead of a teacher. She joined the debate team at school. She got her first boyfriend and her first heartbreak. She fought with Sarah about curfews and homework and whether she could get her ears pierced. Normal teenage stuff that I had never imagined I would get to witness. My relationship with Emily evolved as she got older. She started asking harder questions about why I had left, about what I had been doing for those 11 years, about whether I had ever thought about her. I answered as honestly as I could without making excuses. I told her that I had been selfish and immature and scared. I told her that I had thought about her, but had convinced myself it was better not to reach out. I told her that I regretted every single day I had missed, and that if I could go back I would do everything differently. Emily listened to my answers and processed them in her own way. Sometimes she was angry with me. Sometimes she was understanding. Sometimes she just needed space from me to work through her feelings. There was one conversation in particular that stands out in my memory. Emily was 14, and we were sitting in my car outside her school after a parent-teacher conference. She had been quiet all day, and I could tell something was bothering her. Finally, she asked me if I loved her. Not now, but back then, when she was a baby. Did I love her when I left? I sat there gripping the steering wheel trying to find the right words. I told her that I honestly didn't know. I said I was so young and so overwhelmed that I'm not sure I understood what love meant. But I told her that I knew without any doubt that I loved her now, that she was the most important person in my life, and that I would never leave her again. Emily started crying, and she told me that she had always wondered if there was something wrong with her that had made me leave. She said she used to think that maybe if she had been a better baby, if she hadn't cried so much or been so difficult, maybe I would have stayed. Hearing my daughter say these things absolutely shattered me. I pulled her into a hug and I told her over and over that nothing about my leaving was her fault. I told her she was perfect, that she had always been perfect, and that the failure was entirely mine. We sat in that car for over an hour, just talking and crying, and working through years of hurt that I had caused. Now Emily is 15. She's thriving. She's healthy and happy, and doing well in school. She's thinking about colleges already, talking about wanting to study marine biology in California, or Florida somewhere near the ocean. She has a whole life ahead of her, a life she almost didn't get to live. Sometimes I think about how close I came to losing her, without ever knowing her. If the cancer had come a year earlier before they had developed the treatments that saved her, I would have gotten that phone call too late. I would have lived the rest of my life knowing I had a daughter who died, while I was pretending she didn't exist. Sarah and I are friendly now. We co-parent as best we can, given our complicated history. She married David last year, and Emily was the flower girl at their wedding. I was invited to the ceremony, which felt like a significant marker of how far we had all come. I sat in the back and watched Sarah marry a good man who loved her and loved Emily, and I felt genuinely happy for them. I also felt the weight of everything I had thrown away, the life I could have had if I had been brave enough to stay. But dwelling on that doesn't help anyone. All I can do is be present for the life I have now and the relationship I'm building with my daughter. People sometimes ask me if I regret that it took a medical emergency to bring me back to Emily's life. Of course I regret it. I regret that I needed my daughter to be dying before I would face my responsibilities. I regret that I missed her first steps and her first words and her first day of school. I regret that I wasn't there for her elementary school graduations or her softball games or the million small moments that make up a childhood. I regret that Sarah had to do everything alone for 11 years while I was living my selfish life, pretending I didn't have a daughter. I regret all of it every single day. But I also know that regret without action is useless. What matters now is what I do moving forward. What matters is that I show up for Emily consistently, that I prove to her through my actions that she can depend on me, that I'm not going anywhere ever again. What matters is that I'm honest with her about my failures, while also showing her that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define you forever if you're willing to do the work to be better. I hope that someday when Emily is older and has kids of her own, she'll be able to look back and see that her dad screwed up massively, but then spent the rest of his life trying to make it right. The bone marrow donation saved Emily's life physically, but being her father has saved my life in every other way. It forced me to grow up, to take responsibility, to stop running from hard things. It gave me purpose and meaning that I had been searching for in all the wrong places. It showed me what unconditional love actually feels like, the kind of love that makes you willing to do anything, sacrifice anything, be anything for another person. Emily didn't just survive because of my bone marrow. I survived because of her grace, her willingness to let me into her life despite everything I had done. I know there are other fathers out there who have walked away from their kids. Maybe they're reading this and seeing themselves in my story. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I learned. Your kids don't stop being your kids just because you're not there. They grow up with or without you, and every day you're absent is a day you can never get back. The fear and shame and guilt you feel about reaching out gets worse over time, not better. It becomes easier to stay away than to face what you've done, but your children deserve better than your cowardice. They deserve a parent who shows up, who tries, who admits their mistakes and works to fix them. If you've been gone for months or years or decades, it's not too late. It won't be easy. You'll have to face anger and hurt and probably rejection, at least at first. You'll have to prove yourself over and over again. You'll have to accept that you can't undo the past and you might never fully repair the relationship. But trying is better than not trying. Showing up late is better than never showing up at all. Your kids might not forgive you right away or ever, but at least you'll know you did everything you could to be there for them. At least you'll stop carrying the weight of wondering what if. To all the single parents out there who are doing it alone because the other parent walked away, I see you. I know how hard you're working. I know how exhausted you are. I know how much it hurts to watch your child ask questions about why they're not enough to make their other parent stay. You are doing an incredible job in impossible circumstances. Your strength and dedication are what keep your children going. Thank you for not giving up even when it would be easier to. Thank you for being enough when you shouldn't have to be everything. And to Emily, if you ever read this, I want you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with bone marrow. You showed me what it means to be brave and kind and forgiving. You taught me that love isn't something you fall into, it's something you choose every single day. You made me want to be better, not because I thought I deserved another chance, but because you deserved a father who would fight for you the way you fought to survive. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. I'm sorry for every moment I missed. But I promise you I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. I love you more than I have words to express. This journey has taught me that redemption is possible, but it isn't free. It costs pride and comfort and the ability to hide from your mistakes. It requires showing up day after day even when it's hard, even when you feel like you don't deserve it, even when it would be easier to run. But the cost is worth paying if it means you get to know your child, if it means you get to be part of their life, if it means you get to love them the way they deserve to be loved. I was never a present father until I got that call 11 years later telling me my daughter needed my bone marrow. That medical emergency gave me an opportunity I didn't deserve and almost didn't get. It gave me a second chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. I can't change the past, but I can choose who I am from this moment forward. I choose to be Emily's dad. I choose to show up. I choose to love her with everything I have for as long as I live. And I hope that's enough to make up for at least some of what I took from her when I walked away. What would you do if someone from your past came back asking for help after years of silence? Share your thoughts in the comments below.